Start. Hey everyone, welcome back to Mind Over Masculinity, the podcast where we break down the barriers, challenge stereotypes, and dig deep into the thoughts and experiences that shape who we are. And I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into a topic that resonates with all of us, even if we don't always realize it: creativity and the manhood. So, joining us is someone who knows the ins and outs of creativity like the back of his hand. Patrick. Yeah. So, welcome to the show, Patrick.
I'm happy to be here, Avik.
Lovely, lovely. Nice to meet you. And so, Patrick, like before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all of our listeners. Dear listeners, Patrick is an award-winning artist, visionary educator, public speaker, and consultant who's been teaching and facilitating deep learning for over 40 years. So, with a black belt in karate, do and aikido, he is also a living example of blending discipline and artistry. So his work has been showcased around the world from the US to Japan to China, and he's here to share his wisdom and on how we can reconnect with our innate creative selves, which, spoiler alert, can never truly be lost. So, yeah, so I have got a feeling that this conversation is going to blow your mind and spark something inside you that you might have thought was long gone. So, without further ado, let's get into it. And welcome to the show, Patrick, again.
Excellent. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking
Love,
forward to it, Avik.
lovely, lovely. So, Patrick, creativity and the manhood one, childhood wonder, I would say. uh, how creativity is one of our collective superpowers, and how as a children we are effortless in uh, tapping into it. Why do you think we lose that connection as we grow older?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I have thought about this question a lot, and I am still
Yeah.
compiling my manuscript
Oh,
on creativity, called the philosophy of creativity. And in
wow.
it, I describe what
Mhm.
my theory is of how we do lose, or what I say is that we misplace it. We never lose it. It can't go anywhere. It is part of our inner self,
Hmm.
and it just gets misplaced. So the things that uh, cause it to be misplaced
Hmm.
happen at home, they happen at school, and they happen out in the world. And obviously, my experience is in the school system in the U.S.
Hmm.
and it, as far as I understand, there are obviously differences throughout the world, but
Yeah.
there are similarities that are pretty consistent with respect to how education has been happening in
Yeah.
schools for the last 100+ years or so. But in our school systems,
Mhm.
for essentially the last 50 years, let's say, the emphasis on academics and testing has increased incredibly
Mhm.
to a huge extent. And
Mhm.
and this has pushed our time as children in the school day, connecting to our creativity into a minimum amount of time, if at all. Some schools have no time for any kind of creativity, possibly music, but drawing, dance, uh,
Mhm.
putting on performances, theater pieces, those things are far and few between. So I explain it as a kind of creative colonization, I call it,
Mhm.
which means that creativity is pushed out of our children's
Mhm.
psyche. It's pushed out of their day, especially
Yeah.
in school. They just don't have any time for it. So
True.
there's a less and less time for children to employ their creativity, and creativity is absolutely imperative to learning. It learning doesn't happen unless children are playing. And that's a really big statement, but there's a
Mm,
tremendous amount of research that has been going on for uh,
mm.
actually 100 and plus years, but
Oh.
especially the last 40 or 50 years,
Mhm,
linking play, creativity, and imagination to learning.
mhm.
So in school systems, learning
Yeah.
is happening less and less because children are not able to play while they're learning. And this sounds a little confusing because we think of learning only connected to academics, but children are learning from the moment they get up in the morning till when they finally go to sleep in the evening. And even I think they learn during their when they're dreaming too, for sure. But if there's if children aren't able to have a playful relationship to what they're learning, to what the educator is presenting the children, then the learning is going to be stifled or not as thorough as it could be if it was connected to a sort of a playful attitude or inside play itself. So in school systems, in especially in the US, but I think all over the world, testing and academics have been stressed to a huge extent over the amount of time children are able to play and be creative and use their imagination. So that colonization has caused adults to not feel like they can be creative because they think it's not important. It's kind of meaningless in their mind because of what they went through when they were children. Does that make sense, Avik?
Exactly, exactly makes sense. Yeah. And on this, definitely, you mentioned it correctly. So one thing, like, what's the one practice, according to you, you would recommend to someone who feels like creativity stuck to help them reconnect with their inner
Mm,
child?
sure. That I love that question.
Mhm.
So I th and I feel like this is important with both creativity and manhood, since that's what the many listeners right now are also interested in. And I feel journaling, a daily practice of journaling, is super important for creativity, but also for us as men to contemplate what it means to be a man. So I highly encourage men out there to get a journal and start journaling if they're interested in both subjects, do that. If they're interested in only in creativity, that's fine. Or if they're only interested in masculinity and exploring manhood, that's fine also. But it can be both. Or you can use it to explore your work environment. You can use it to explore everything under the sun with respect to your life. But as a practice, having a little bit of time each day, it could be 5 minutes in the morning. Just set aside 5 minutes and get your journal out, put the date at the top of the page, and start writing. And if you're stuck, if you don't, if you think, I don't know what to write, simply write, I feel, and fill in the blank. And when you run out of that, then say it again. Write down, I feel something about this. And that will get you started about journaling. And I really feel like in no time at all, in a couple of weeks, you all will start to really see the benefit of writing down what you're feeling, what you're thinking. It can be about creativity or it can be about masculinity and manhood. Both of those, I'm I guarantee you'll be surprised at what you can start to tune into about what you feel. With respect to creativity, if you're starting your journal and just write down, when I was 3, I remember playing this. Or when I was 5, I've loved to go outside and play this. Or I love to be inside and play this. Or I played this with my friends. That will give you a clue on where your earliest feelings of being connected to imagination, play, and creativity are, and that will lead you somewhere. It may not lead you to the exact same place that you were when you were 4 years old and what you loved to play when you were 4, but there may be a similarity. So I highly recommend people journaling every day, just a little bit of time. And soon you might see how incredibly helpful it is. And you may put aside 15 minutes a day to journal. And that would be awesome. And I highly recommend that you use a pen and paper instead
Exactly.
of instead of a screen, because
Hmm.
there's something about the physical act of making marks on a piece of paper that
Okay.
that makes it more solid, that you
Mm.
can carry it around with you. If you're doing a commute, you're on the train or you're on the bus or what, however you're commuting, maybe not when you're driving, but
Mm.
take your journal with you and jot down ideas that come up. It will surprise you how valuable of in some ways it's sort of like an external memory, but old fashioned.
Understood. Yeah. Perfect. Lovely explained. Yeah. And I mean, creativity in the relationships. Creativity doesn't just live in the art or the work. So, uh, I mean, how do you think that creativity plays a role in building the deeper and more meaningful relationships?
Mm, wonderful question.
Mhm.
I think creativity is super important with respect to relationships, whether they're your personal relationships or relationships in the business world or in the academic world, wherever you might find yourself. But let's focus on relationships with the closest people in your life, your significant other, your children, your parents, your relatives, and your friends. I think that when you start to explore your own creativity, how you think about things will start to develop, and especially how you think about relationships. Simply put, ask yourself, how can I make this relationship with my mother, my father, my wife, my husband, whatever it might be, my children, how can I make this, and think of one particular relationship. How can I make this relationship better? And the way we make relationships better is by creativity. We think up ideas. We think, well, maybe we can go to the park and take a walk, or maybe I can get them some flowers, whoever they may be. All of these thoughts are types of creativity, and the more we tap into allowing ourselves or giving ourselves permission is maybe a better way to put it. We should, everybody out there today, whenever you hear this, take a moment and just give yourself permissions. Just say, I give myself permission to be creative. And I think that's going to be helpful. And you can you can say that with respect to, I'm going to give myself permission to be more creative in my relationships. And this is how. And you can use your journal to write things down so you can remember all the ideas that you have. But think of your relationships as a piece of art. Think of them as, oh, this is a symphony. My relationship with my wife is a symphony. and how do I want that symphony to sound? What kind of beautiful instruments do I want to use for this particular part of the symphony? And that gives you an idea of how to approach relationships in a different way, in a fun and more exciting way, to use your imagination, to be playful, and to use your creativity.
That's interesting. And also, like, a lot of people associate creativity with fear of failure. So, what's your perspective on failure, and how can men reframe it as a part of their creative process?
Yeah, that's powerful with
Mhm.
men and failure. We are we are pushed to a very high degree in some ways not to fail. But I think the issue is
Mhm.
how we are relating to failure. When
Mhm.
we are inevitably going to fail
Okay.
at
Mhm.
everything that we do. Not
Yeah.
all the time, but that's the
Mhm.
whole point of learning how to do something new is when
Mhm.
I'm attempting to, well, I'll give you an example from recently in my painting career. I've been painting for 50 plus years, and
Ooh.
and I just a year and a half ago started to paint portraits. And I just, it was one failure after another. It was intensely difficult, but I kept at it. And that's the process with respect to failure. It's not, it's not the end of everything to to fail. And that's what I think that is one of the benefits that the arts teach. That let's say I don't play an instrument, but if you're playing an instrument and you think and you're learning it, you're learning to play, let's say, the violin, and you have an idea in your head that you will never, ever, in all the years that you're about to play, if you're going to play the violin for the next 50 years,
Mhm.
if you think that you're never going to hit a wrong note, then
Mhm.
you're going to put so much pressure on yourself that the failure is going to be insurmountable.
Yeah.
There is a positive quality to failure. It shows you that that wasn't the right way to do whatever it was that you're doing. So if I started learning how to play the violin, I would be playing more wrong notes than right notes. And when
Mhm.
I first started to draw,
Yeah.
I was not drawing everything really well. But it took a lot of failures, or it took a lot of trying, it
Mhm.
took a lot of attempts to find what we're trying to draw, or
Mhm.
find the right note, or find the right way to talk to a friend or to a relative. That it we may not do it the optimal way every single time,
Mhm.
but we are attempting, we're striving. Striving is super important to with respect to failure. If you're failing and failing and failing and you're not striving, you're going to be sinking and sinking and sinking. But if
Mhm.
you're striving, if you have in your heart and your mind, I am going to do this better, as as striving to have a better relationship with the people in your life. That is a super important part of how we can look at failure as a way that's going to help us rather than hinder us. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Exactly. Yeah. Definitely. And on this, like, let's zoom out a bit. I mean, how do you see creativity as a force for change, not just for the individual, but for
Hmm.
society as a whole? Yeah.
Sure, sure. I think change only happens through creativity.
Mhm.
That there and well, there's change in nature, which could be a flood or a tornado, a snowstorm, a hurricane, all these, all those are in some ways they're on a level of creativity that's way beyond us in our ability to conceive.
Yeah.
But in our lives, aside from nature, only we only make change happen when we are being creative. It it takes it takes each of us, either as individuals or as groups, collectives of a community or a city or a state or a country or a whole section of the world or the entire world, to use our imaginations to
Yeah.
think, how can we do this differently?
True.
This doesn't, this, whatever this might be, is not working. We need to
Mm.
change it. How can we do things differently that will make it better? And that is relying on our ability to tap into our creativity.
Yeah. Perfect. Lovely. Great. So this conversation has been so incredible, Patrick. I mean, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your stories, your vision for what creativity can mean in our lives. And also, like for everyone who is listening, here's your challenge. Take that one thing Patrick said today and put it into an action. So,
Mm.
whether it's reconnecting with your inner child, or embracing the failure, or even starting a creative practice, just take that first step. Yes. And remember, creativity isn't just for the artists or the inventors, it's for you, all of you. It's how you solve the problems, connect with others, and show up in the world. That's the main important thing. Yeah. And I'll also put all the details and the links of Patrick so that you can reach out to him and you can discuss your queries. You can definitely share your queries if you have. I can definitely share with Patrick, or you can directly connect with Patrick. And also, if you have enjoyed today's episode, do not forget to share it, leave a review, and let us know your thoughts, as I mentioned. So until next time, this is your host Avik reminding you to keep your mind open, your heart full, and your creativity alive. So catch you next week. Thank you so much.